Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Joe and I'm the dad.
And I'm Raya and I'm the daughter.
I was in a restaurant the other day.
Yeah.
And I happened to notice the boss walking over to the head chef in front of our table.
Sure.
He said, "Hey, can you make me something up real quick?" And the chef said, "Sure. By the way, did you know that the Queen was in here yesterday?"
Oh.
He said, "Really?" He said, "No, I just made it up."
After the elections in November, we did an episode here where we talked about some of the good news that came out. And one of the pieces of good news was that Sarah McBride was elected as a member of Congress and as one of the representatives in the House of Representatives.
Yes. And the very first one.
Very first transgender representative. We found an interview that was done with her that we thought, let's do a reaction to this because she has so many good things to say. And I think you're going to like some of the positivity. If you want to hear the whole interview, you can follow the link in the show episode notes. Of course, the big issue right now is how much hatred and opposition she has right now because she is a transgender minority in a place where the issue on the table is transgender issues. Let's hear how she responds to that.
One of the biggest takeaways for me is how much Congress is sadly a reality TV show. The goal of the day is to get airtime. In order to get airtime, the easiest way is to use the strategies of folks on Bravo TV shows where to get airtime, you pick a person, pick a fight with them, throw wine in their face, and that gets airtime.
Let's pick a fight with someone, make something up, and let it go to create airtime for them. They're placing in front of the public unreality.
Right.
Not the truth.
And that's the thing that's so frustrating, I feel like, as a transgender person, is that we're not treated as people in the media right now, especially on the right wing, that are using us as political tools to stir people up and get people angry about things. And I don't want to be a political piece. I just want to live.
Exactly.
So I always knew when I decided to run for this seat that there would be some members of Congress who would use my service to score political points and gain attention. And I always knew that that would include misgendering. I just assumed that the performative nature of federal politics would result in people misgendering me. And one of the things I said to people during the course of the campaign is they're going to try to do this, and my job is going to be not to give them the response that they want. I go in every day focused on my job, focused on serving Delaware, focused on introducing now 2 and soon to be 3 bipartisan bills. But I also go in recognizing that at any moment, a member could decide to use my presence in a space to gain attention. It doesn't feel good when it happens. You know, the first time it happened was on the floor in my first floor speech. There had been some signs, people had talked amongst themselves that it probably wouldn't happen. Maybe some conversations among some staff, and the tea leaves they thought suggested that it wouldn't happen. So when it did happen the first time on the floor...
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
When I was introduced as the gentleman from Delaware, Mr. McBride...
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Delaware, Mr. McBride, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I was elected, I've been intentionally misgendered. Before I came to Congress, I wasn't getting misgendered. Occasionally, I would get misgendered intentionally, someone trying to score points. You know, I'd be in a parade and someone would yell something out. That doesn't bother me, right? Like, I know they're doing it in a way that's crude, but like, it's not news to me that I'm trans, right? I'm proud of who I am. That's my problem. I didn't think it would be sort of emotionally heavy for me. It is a different thing when it's coming from the dais of the United States House of Representatives, right? It is a different thing when it's in the congressional record, and that does hurt more than it would typically. I think for me, in that moment, what hurt on the floor was I could see people in the gallery snickering. And I'm a person, right? This is the first time I'm on the floor of the House of Representatives. I'm nervous to deliver my first floor speech. And so I just went into my speech and delivered it.
You may have seen the clip that happened when she was introduced in one of the subcommittees. The person introduced her as Mr. McBride, and she responded, "Thank you, Madam Chair." There was a big question, and they went back and forth, and then one of the other senators said, "This is not appropriate," to the person that had introduced her. They ended up just canceling everything. And people sent this out as if it was this big win. Look at how she made this guy look like a fool. I was actually really frustrated when I saw that clip because I felt like, oh, this is just more of a reminder how much there are people out there that hate people like us and would rather just stop everything altogether, just shut it down rather than have any conversation and even acknowledge that people like us exist. I actually really like how she responded after the fact that, well, people said they thought this was this gotcha point that she got against this guy that introduced her. I think you'll be surprised how she actually felt about it.
In the instance in committee where I did respond by saying, "Madam Chair," to a man who was presiding, I truthfully regretted saying "Madam Chair" right after I said it. I went back to my office and was not happy with myself. It's just not my style. I'm really here to focus on the job and to be serious. And you can have humor and sometimes it's right to just respond in kind. But I don't think I fulfill my responsibilities to anyone, whether that's Delawareans or any other community I'm a part of, by consistently sinking to their level. I think that there is no question that there are added responsibilities. There is added pressure to a first. I would never compare myself to Jackie Robinson, but one thing that after I started, people recommend I watch 42. There is a really powerful scene in the start where the owner of the Dodgers says to Jackie Robinson, "If you respond to a slur with a slur, they'll only hear yours." And I think that that is a apt description of the challenge that most marginalized people face when entering a workplace. At the end of the day, the way I try to think about it, though, is the only way that I can guarantee that while I may be a first, I'm not the last, is to just quite simply be the best member of Congress that I can be and to do the nuts and bolts of the job to the best of my ability. I'll make mistakes. There'll be times where I should respond to things, and there are times where I shouldn't respond to things, that I won't strike the right balance. I am going to make mistakes, and I think giving myself the same grace that I'm willing to extend to other people in navigating what is a reasonably unprecedented situation where, I've tried to look at other examples to learn from, and I haven't been able to find someone who has entered Congress as a first when the identity that makes them a first is at the center of political debate and the district that they represent isn't significantly or predominantly made up of that identity.
I think it shows a lot about how difficult it can be to be transgender in our society, or really, by extension, any minority. There's always the pressure that you can't just be real. You can't let your frustration when you're mistreated because of who you are come out. Some people will cheer you if you do, and some people will be mad, but it never is bringing more light. It's bringing more heat than it is light.
Yes, that's correct.
But it puts so much pressure on us that we always have to be the model person. We feel like here she is out there having to represent all transgender people. That's not fair to her.
That's a big responsibility. It's one I don't think I could handle.
No, it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
Somebody actually told me, "Raya, you should consider going into politics. You'd be really good." And I said, I feel like I might be really good, but it's not who I am. I couldn't handle this. And so she really sums up how difficult it can be in the place that we're put in, especially for her, at the forefront of this issue. I really like how she puts this into the context of where we've come from, because we've been feeling like it. I've been feeling like, boy, there's been so much positive change, but she's looking at the difference historically from where we were, say, 10 years ago. Listen to what she has to say.
I think we are experiencing a significant moment of regression culturally in this country on all issues of gender. Public opinion is worse now than it was on almost every issue than it was 5 years ago. There are still trans rights issues that have majority support, but every single poll I have seen shows less support now than there was 5 or 6 years ago on pretty much every issue, from non-discrimination protections, which still maintain majority support, military participation, which still maintains majority support, to other issues that either don't have, never have had, or now don't have majority support. And I think that there are a couple of reasons for that. One, it's a sustained right-wing disinformation, misinformation, and fear-mongering campaign. That has an effect. I think one of the things that people would say in 2015, 2016 to me is, oh my goodness, it feels like we're moving so quickly on trans rights. My reason for that was, I said at the time, and I still think this is true, I think there's sort of a transfer of momentum from the LGB to the T, from marriage equality to trans rights, where people in 2015, 2016, right after marriage equality became the law of the land, they went, I remember being wrong on marriage. And so there was that lesson of just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that you won't ultimately support it. They kind of took that lesson and transferred it at the time to trans rights. And I think what it did was it created a false sense of security. It created a dynamic where public opinion was sort of a mile wide but an inch deep. I think that because of that, we perhaps as a community didn't do enough public education to build the foundation that the gay rights part of the movement had built when they got to 2012, 2014 with progress on the issue of marriage, where that public support was rooted in a knowledge foundation, an understanding of who gay people were. And I don't think that that foundation existed or to this day exists for trans people.
Dad, do you feel like that's true, that in the past 10 years that we've taken steps backwards?
In some areas, yes, and in some areas, no. We continue to move forward in so many areas, but there definitely are areas where we've taken steps backwards, and transgender area is one of those that really has been getting beaten down. It's unfortunate that that has become a political issue.
I feel like in my local community, a lot of people know me. And so the perspective in a very right-leaning area is you do you, and however you want to live, that's fine. And they, in a sense, are making a distinction between transgender issues as a political issue that they are very opposed to, and transgender people in sports and locker rooms and that sort of thing. And then my right to exist as a person, because we're in a very nice community. We're
Yes.
Midwest, and people are nice to one another, and no one would ever treat me poorly in the area just because of who I am. But I feel like the issue that I have is the disconnect oftentimes between me as a person and what they believe politically.
Where the aggressive politicians don't mind at all becoming aggressive. In fact, they use it as an example to show their constituents how tough they are.
Right. But then, like for me, then I have made some concessions as well, because I, like Sarah, don't want to stir up problems or difficulties. For instance, anytime I go to an event at my kid's school, which also happens to be the school that I graduated from, I am careful always to only use the teacher's bathroom, which is a single stall bathroom. I never use the public bathrooms because I don't want anybody to say, hey, what are you doing in here? Somebody that knows me. Now, anywhere else that I go, nobody thinks twice about it. If I'm at a gas station somewhere, nobody thinks at all about it. But
Correct.
because people know me in the community that I live in, and that's a very similar situation to what she has. People know her, and so they specifically made a bill saying, you can't use the bathroom here where you work. And she's just rolled with it.
I got this hate, including a lot of people telling me I should kill myself. KYS, KYS, KYS. And I never would have expected that people telling me that I should do that would ever actually impact me. But at a certain point, the volume and velocity of it became so much that I couldn't help but feel it.
Wow. Imagine telling someone, kill yourself, and then cutting it down to a little KYS response so they all know exactly what that means. Imagine teachers getting together in school and looking at one of the students that's having problems and saying, kill yourself. I don't think they'd have a job anymore. I just cannot get over how they think that's acceptable in Congress. We voted for these people?
It's so dehumanizing. That's what frustrates me most about it. The thing is hard to remember, and I'm trying to learn this myself, is that when you see somebody act like that, it tells you way more about who they are than anything about who you are. I always do my best, and this is why I really like her and why I wanted to do this response today, is how positive, how much she just says, I'm not going to let that affect me. But yet you can't not listen to what she says about how this does affect her and how she learned to respond to this.
I remember thinking, I don't know that I can do this. And I went on this sort of information adventure to understand the psychology and bullying of trolling. And I came across a This American Life episode that really just allowed things to click for me. It was Lindy West, who wrote about her body and her weight a lot. And she would get trolled. And then she wrote about how much that trolling hurt her. And the troll reached out and apologized. He acknowledged that he was struggling with his own weight. You know, there's the old cliche that like the biggest closet cases are the biggest bullies. And in some cases that's true, but it underestimates a larger, more universal truth, which is that everyone has an insecurity. And the thing about LGBTQ people is that if we are out, we have taken that insecurity, that fear, that thing that society has told us we should be ashamed of, and we have not only accepted it, but in many cases walk forward from a place of pride in it. And the bullies see that power. They see that individual agency in conquering our own fear, and they're jealous of it. When I see the things that people say about me writ large, to me, I just think, I hope they find healing. And truthfully, it's one of the reasons why I do this work, is because I think in this country, we so desperately need politicians who recognize that they don't have to believe that people are right for what people are facing to be wrong. And we don't have to believe that people are right for us to try to right that wrong. And I want to fight for people who look like me and think like me, and people who don't look like me and don't think like me and might even be saying really, really, really hurtful things about me. Because we will all be better off if all of us heal a little bit.
Now, here's a great example of someone elected in office that said, I represent everyone. I want to represent the people who are like me, and I want to represent the people who are not like me. It's a professional person out there speaking to you. Instead, we have a bunch of these politicians in there that humiliate themselves in front of their own constituents. This is unacceptable. As far as I'm concerned, this frustrates me so much about Congress that they can even imagine it's okay to say the kinds of things they're saying in public.
And this is where I feel like we need to find places to recharge. I love listening to her because it reminds me that I can approach the world with positivity. And that's what we try to be, is in this podcast, your place where you can come and refresh and recharge, because we need it. There is so much negativity out there. Unless we intentionally set our disposition that we're going to respond not in kind, but by being kind.
If there's one takeaway that these politicians should have understood, is that you are responsible for representing your entire constituency.
Depending on where you're at, you may be in a place where you've got the strength to be able to respond similar to how she is. And I really admire and respect how she can approach people that come at her with hate and say, I have your best interest at heart. And if you're attacking me the way that you are, then you've got some issues. I like what she says there. Hurt people hurt people. And that's absolutely true. But depending on where you are right now, you might not be in a place where you have that kind of safety and the healing yourself to be able to respond to people that way. You, as a listener, might need to go and retreat from negative people right now. As we've said in previous episodes, Dad, you had somebody that said, when you find a negative person, don't walk away. Run. And that might be where you are, but then if you have the strength, if you have the ability to engage, boy, the world needs people that will approach one another in love.
I made a point earlier that they are representing their entire constituency. They think, but these people are a small minority. Every one of your constituents in some form is a minority of something. So your entire constituency is a group of small minorities.
I'm Monica Scarbin. I love listening to the Transcendent podcasts, probably because I've been a guest speaker. I've been listening to these podcasts for over 2 years now and have found them to be not only inspirational, but very informative and emotionally lifting to my spirits, especially when I'm not feeling very hot. I'm a supporter, and I'm glad to be a supporter. Please go to transcendent.com, click on support. By as little as $3 a month, you can cancel at any time.
Something I really appreciate about Sarah McBride is her difference in perspective from you and I. She is 15 years younger, 16 years actually younger than I am, and she's out there changing the world. And so her perspective with that younger viewpoint is really interesting. Here's what she has to say about that.
We often think of history and humanity as cumulative. We feel like we are the beneficiary of hundreds of years of lessons of history. But the reality is that unless you have lived it and experienced it, it's pretty easy not to know it. You know, my generation, we were born after the fall of the Soviet Union, right? We have existed in a world post-civil rights, post-1960s. And one of the things that I take comfort in this moment, having tried to take time to listen and learn about what it felt like to live in the times prior to the 1960s, is that the sense of inevitability that with hard work change will come that we have felt in a post-1960s world, the sense that we were on this sort of unending cresting wave of cultural momentum, that is all the exception in our history, right? Yes, we have every reason to fear that change won't come right now, but you can't tell me that the reasons for hopelessness now are greater than the reasons for hopelessness for an LGBTQ person in 1965 before Stonewall, when they maybe never knew of a reality where they could live openly and authentically as themselves without violating the law. Every previous generation, especially those generations prior to the 60s and 70s, faced seemingly impossible odds. They could not see the light at the end of the tunnel. Yet they persevered, they summoned their hope, they found the light, and they changed the world.
So what she's really saying there is, if you don't know history, you're destined to repeat it. Let's see what she says about what should we do? How should Congress react? How should we react? What can we do at this point to change the perception?
I think obviously we should be pushing back against the efforts to sanction or mandate discrimination against trans people writ large in this country. We should be fighting back against efforts to insert government between patients, providers, and families. We should be protecting trans service members who are serving this country. And in all of that, we should recognize that the most important thing for anyone who's being targeted by this administration is for us to slow this administration down. And unfortunately, because of the results of the last election, the main lever at our disposal is public opinion. We do have to recognize that we have to fight hard and fight smart, which means fighting and focusing on the issues where the public is with us, and therefore we can turn the public as quickly as possible against Donald Trump. And doesn't mean we don't fight on other things, but it means we put focus on the central case that Donald Trump made to voters and the issue that voters care about the most, which is their economic well-being. And if we can shift public opinion against Donald Trump as quickly as possible, it throws sand in the gears of Donald Trump's authoritarian machine. Because right now we do live in a democracy. That is at risk. But we do live in a democracy. Public opinion still matters.
So that's what we do legislatively, but then how should we respond? Because this is really where our place comes in as a podcast is we're trying to preserve family relationships and help people understand what are transgender people going through and LGBTQ people as a whole, and how can we make things better?
We have to fight those fights in a smart way.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to message in a smarter way. Sometimes the message that is viscerally comforting to someone like me is not helpful and sometimes even counterproductive in reaching and convincing a person who is just tuning into this conversation or who has a diversity of thought. We have to create space for some imperfect allies. We have to recognize that if we're going to have 50% plus one in support of basic non-discrimination protections, if we're going to have 50% plus one in support of protecting access to medically necessary care, that by definition will have to include some people in the 70% who oppose trans people participating in sports. That conversation needs to continue with people, but we can't dismiss them as bigots or remove them from our coalition, because then we will have a ceiling of 30% on any coalition in defense of anyone's rights.
I think that's a hard truth for many people in the LGBTQ community to accept, that sometimes what we really wish we were able to say and where we wish society was in terms of being accepting, that we need to take a few steps back in order to be a little more pragmatic.
Let's see what she says about navigating her way in Congress today.
My strategy is not to let any of this get in the way of me doing my job to the best of my ability. I don't give them opportunities to punish me because I violate the rule that Johnson put in place. I use the restroom in my office. I just do my job, right? If they're going to misgender me on the floor, look, a lot of folks, they're like, Sarah doesn't make a stink when we just say member from Delaware, Representative McBride. It's a way to respect Sarah and doesn't make them feel like they're saying something that they don't want to say or that they feel like they'd get politically punished for saying by gendering me correctly. Like, fine. But there's always a risk that someone wants to make a thing out of it. I'm not going to not go to committee. I'm going to go and I'm going to speak. I'm not going to not go to the floor. I'm going to go to the floor and speak. And I'm not going to let them derail that work because they want 15 minutes of fame on social media. I'm going to go in the elevator. I'll say hi. If some of these folks pass me, I'll say, hey, how are you? I'm not saying it's the easiest thing, and I'm not saying I don't get nervous.
It's not an easy thing at all. But you know what is an easy thing is listening to this podcast. I really appreciate everything that she had to say. And I think this time to listen to the messages she's bringing is much bigger than just the political message. She has a perspective on how we approach the world that's really positive, and that's the positivity that we want to be living in as well.
It's like the first woman in Congress and how much she had to go through just to be accepted. Now we've got the first transgender person in Congress. There'll be more. There'll be more gay. There'll be more lesbian. There'll be more LGBTQ plus. The voice will continue to grow, and the acceptance will continue to grow. Will there ever be total acceptance? Probably not. But when you compare it to the history of how women had to work their way into Congress, you can realize that, yes, we are moving forward. It may be difficult. There may be enemies out there. There may be problems, but there's always problems. And you solve one solution and you discover a new problem. And that's one of the reasons we're here, to help you understand, to work your way through that. And that's why we are really excited to say, we'll see you Monday.